Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will continue our revision. In part 1, among the topics we looked at was volcanic landforms and their related activities. In this video, we are going to look more closely at volcanic activities while we try to pull in some other topics from the syllabus. Now, if you compare the map on the right to the one that we studied in part 1, you will notice that the drainage pattern is similar. Notice that the rivers appear to be radiating from a central point. This drainage pattern is known as a radial drainage pattern. And radial drainage patterns are often associated with volcanic cones. The volcanic mountain we are looking at is called the Soufriere Hills and is found in the island of Montserrat. Now, Montserrat is an overseas territory of the United Kingdom. It is one of the islands which make up the Lesser Antilles of the Caribbean. The island is located along a convergent plate margin in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, convergent plate margin is just one of 3 types of plate margins. At a transform plate margin, the plates are sliding past each other and often create earthquakes like those we see along the San Andreas Fault in California. At divergent plate margins, the plates are moving away from each other. At convergent plate margin, the plates are moving towards each other. In the Caribbean region, all 3 types of plate margins can be found, as we can see on the tectonic map. In the area around Cayman, west of Jamaica, there is a small area where the plates are moving away from each other. So this is an area of divergence. In the north, we see the Caribbean plate sliding past the North American plate. So this is a transform plate margin. And in the east, we see the Caribbean plate moving towards the American plate. So this is an area of convergence. Now, the type of features and activities that occur at convergent plate margins will depend on the type of crust that is involved. We have oceanic crust and continental crust. Continental crusts are thicker than oceanic crust. Oceanic crusts are heavier than continental crust. Montserrat is formed at a convergent plate margin where 2 oceanic plates meet. So we know that oceanic crust can sink, but both will not sink. The one that will sink in a case like this will be the older one, which will also be the heavier one. So in this particular situation, the North American plate, which is older and heavier, sinks beneath the Caribbean plate. At the point at which it sinks, a deep sea trench is formed. When it goes into the mantle, it carries some amount of water with it, and this makes it easier for the rocks to melt in the mantle. The melting of the rock causes magma to form, and because the magma is lighter than the surrounding rocks, it rises to the surface. At the surface, it forms a series of islands called island arc. So Montserrat is part of the Eastern Caribbean island arc. The map shows that it is located to the southwest of Antigua and Barbuda and to the northwest of Guadeloupe. All right, we can identify Guadeloupe easily because it has a butterfly shape. Guadeloupe is unique in that one side is volcanic, the other side is mainly made of limestone. Montserrat can be described as having a pear shape because it is narrow to the north and it is wider in the south. It is 18 kilometers long and 11 kilometers wide. The key shows that the color green represents lower land. So if we examine the map to the left, we see that the lower land is mainly found along the coast, while the interior is more rugged and mountainous. And this is typical of many Caribbean territories. Now the map on the right shows that there are 3 mountainous areas in the island of Montserrat. There is the Silver Hills to the north, then there is the Center Hills, and then we have the Soufriere Hills. Between the volcanic mountains are steep-sided river valleys called guts. Now, a lot of the times when you get map work questions, you are asked to talk about the relationship between relief and the road network. So let us see if we can try to practice that based on these maps of Montserrat. Now, as we examine the maps, we can see that the relief has a strong influence on the road network. Notice that the main roads have been constructed in the areas along the coast and within the guts. And this is because it is easier for construction to take place in these areas. The capital city, Plymouth, is well located because it is well linked by roads to the rest of the island. For most Caribbean countries, the urban areas are characterized by having more services and more infrastructure, more job opportunities, and these generally attract a greater population. At the same time, there is usually less investment made in rural areas, so there is usually less services, less infrastructure, and lower population. So this is typical of all or most Caribbean countries, and therefore it is, or I should say was, the case of Montserrat, with Plymouth being the main urban center. But this situation suddenly changed in 1995 due to the closeness of the Soufriere Hills to the Near East. The Soufriere Hills are a set of stratovolcanoes. We talk about stratovolcanoes, another name for it is composite cone, and it is made up of alternating layers of ash and lava. Now, after being dormant for a long period, the Soufriere Hills became active again in July 1995. This resulted in hazards such as ashfall, pyroclastic flow, and mud flow, also called lehar, among others. A pyroclastic flow is a fast-moving, gravity-driven cloud of hot gas mixed with hot volcanic rocks. Ashfall is the falling of ash which has been ejected very high and very far in the atmosphere. Lahar or mud flow is a hot or cold mixture of water and volcanic fragments which form a moving fluid mass which flows down the slope of a volcano. During the eruptions, viscous lava was ejected onto the surface, creating a lava dome, which later became unstable and collapsed. In fact, the dome collapsed and grew back several times. The volcano was most unstable at the periods when the dome collapsed, because when this happened, it created pyroclastic flow and sometimes ash falls. And this pyroclastic flow would flow all the way down the slopes and even into the sea. Ash falls covered Plymouth and the immediate surrounding areas, blocking out sunlight in the process. A number of villages became inundated with ash and mud up to 10 meters deep. When heavy rains coincide with volcanic eruption, it can result in the formation of mud flow. This has happened in Montserrat on a number of occasions. For example, on May 20th, 2006, the country experienced a large dome collapse, which coincided with a period of intense rainfall, and this resulted in mud flow. Let us now look at some of the impacts of the eruptions, and we're going to look at environmental impacts, social impacts, and economic impacts. Environmental impacts. Prior to the eruption, which started in 1995, the highest peak on the island was Chance's Peak at a height of 909 meters above sea level. However, the lava dome, which currently forms the summit of the Soufriere Hills, is the highest point on the island, reaching 1,089 meters above sea level. Much of the forest in the south was also destroyed, killing many wildlife in the process. A number of freshwater bodies were also polluted as a result of the eruption. During eruptions, pyroclastic materials flowed down the eastern flanks and into the Caribbean Sea, extending the coast by several hundred square feet in each instance. So, in summary, the whole landscape of southern Montserrat was changed as a result of the eruptions. Then on to social impacts. Due to the eruption, 19 people lost their lives. Many villages were flattened by the volcanic materials. The capital city, Plymouth, became a ghost town. Subsequently, government activities were relocated to Braids in the northwest part of the island, though the official capital is still Plymouth. Let us examine the maps and try to figure out why Braids might have been chosen as the new administrative center. Notice that, like Plymouth, Braids is also located along the coast, and this would make it easier for trading to take place. If we notice on the map to the right, we see that just like Plymouth, Braids is also well connected by roads to the rest of the island. All right, so here we have Braids and Plymouth again. And as you can see, we are seeing Plymouth before the eruption and Plymouth after the eruption. As a result of the eruptions, the residents of southern Montserrat had to evacuate to the north of the island, where many stayed in tents for a while. As the situation grew worse, they had to migrate. Some persons migrated to neighboring Caribbean territories, while others migrated to the UK. About 2/3 of the population migrated. Now, remember, this type of migration is referred to as forced or involuntary migration because it is a matter of life and death. The population of Montserrat in April 2023 was about 4,958. So Montserrat is one of the smallest countries in the world if we look at it based on population. The 2018 population pyramid shows that most of the population is made up of people in the middle age group, while there is a small proportion of youth and elderly population. This means that there is generally a low dependency ratio. When we talk about dependency ratio, we are talking about that ratio that compares the number of persons in the labor force with those that are not in the labor force. The current population is largely made up of returned migrants, immigrants from other Caribbean countries, and those who had remained in the north during the eruptions. The distribution of population in the country is largely related to the volcanic eruptions and the areas where there are volcanic eruptions. According to the 2015 census data shown in the table, of the 3 parishes of the country, only St. Peter now accommodates residents. The other parishes of St. Anthony and St. George's are found in the restricted area and are therefore uninhabited. Now on to economic impacts. Prior to the eruptions, about 80% of infrastructure and businesses were located in the south, especially within the capital city of Plymouth. Most agricultural activities also occurred in the southern regions. Very little economic activity occurred in the north at that time. This means that the country suffered a lot of financial loss during the eruption. In fact, a crime of opportunity also occurred as a result of the eruptions. In February 1998, it was discovered that the main vault in the main bank of Plymouth had been robbed. Montserrat is now heavily dependent on aid from the UK, which makes up most of the government's annual budget. Citizens are mainly employed by the government. Other persons earn their living through construction, transportation, operating small shops and restaurants, as well as farming. The tourism sector attracts persons who are intrigued by the impact of the volcanic eruptions on the landscape. Many take day trips to the Montserrat Volcano Observatory, which provides a view of the area which have been devastated by the eruptions. During their trip, the visitors also get a chance to view artifacts and watch documentaries to gain an educational experience. Other tourists participate in hiking and bird watching, while those who are fascinated by the coast do diving and snorkeling to view coral reefs. The advantage of Montserrat is that it is free from the crowds found in other Caribbean destinations. However, though tourism is growing, it is still a small contributor to the economy. Okay, so I would like you to pause the video and try to answer these questions. If you find that you are unable to answer these questions, I would advise you to just go back and rewatch the video so that you will be able to answer the questions. And finally, here is an example of an exam question. It says, describe 3 ways in which volcanic activity affect life and property. So for this question, you will try to think about 3 impacts of the volcanic eruption, but you will need to elaborate on each of these impacts. When you elaborate, you need to ensure that you are linking the impact to the volcanic activity. So for example, if you say that farmlands were destroyed, remember, farmlands could have been destroyed by any form of hazard. So you want to show that maybe it was the ashfall or the pyroclastic flow that caused the crops to be destroyed. Okay, so this is where we will stop. Thank you for watching, and all the best in your studies as you prepare for your exams.